Hello, and welcome to a new episode of Secret Tour videos. Today we will be talking about business models for sustainable, engaging, and creative tourism. And I have the pleasure to host my colleague, María Rodriguez Ayerbe, a research assistant from Copenhagen Business School, which is also a leader of WP2 on business models for sustainable, engaging, and creative tourism. Maria, hi, hello.
Hi, Mateus. Thanks for having me.
Maria, within WP2, you have been researching business models for sustainable, engaging, and creative tourism. What are the insights of that research?
So the CBS team has produced 2 reports, and the first report is mainly based on a systematic literature review. And the literature we look into is on cultural business model, which is actually a quite new body of research, as most of the articles we were reviewing were published from 2017 and onwards. So this means that there's not a clear consensus on what are the best practices in the field. So the articles we looked into were mainly based on empirical case studies, and they had an emphasis on the business models that aimed at protecting and enhancing cultural heritage, both in rural and urban areas, while keeping in mind sustainable tourism solutions for local communities. So there are some common challenges across the different case studies, and this include, for example, lack of financial resources, lack of tourism attractiveness due to the remoteness of the sites or the lack of awareness of the sites, as well as the general lack of tourism infrastructure or the aging population in the areas, which might hinder the workforce availability, right? So there is a common narrative in the literature that often frames these challenges into solutions, and this actually speaks very closely to concepts of social entrepreneurship. And let me give you an example. La Paranza Cooperative, which is in Naples, aims at reducing local youth unemployment by training local young people into tour guides, and this is at the core of their business models, which means they transform the challenge of a local socioeconomic issue into an opportunity for local development, right? And in this first report, we also looked at who are the main stakeholders of different projects and whether there are some patterns in the different governance structures. And again, we find that there are a quite diverse nature of the organizations, as we find that stakeholders gather around foundations or cooperatives or small private enterprises. But there is a pattern in these partnerships, in these organizations, that often includes both private and public sector actors. And some of the stakeholders involved are usually municipalities, tourism providers, project organizers, and most importantly, local communities. And then about the second report we produced, it was mainly focused on conceptual classification of cultural business models, which was inspired both by the literature as well as insights from the pilots from Secret Tour. In essence, we provide a categorization that is based on 2 key dimensions, and that is the governance structure and the nature of the assets. So the governance can either be a more centralized institutionalized body, or it can be a more decentralized network-based of semi-autonomous stakeholders. And this, of course, brings about a little bit more of challenges in aligning priorities and responsibilities. And then in terms of assets, the different models can either focus on more tangible or intangible assets, which are maybe easier to transfer across locations.
Secret Tour is a lot about the rural and peripheral areas. How, based on your research, how do the business models differ from the classical ones? So how do the business models in those great rural and peripheral places differ from the classical ones?
So thinking of the more classical business model, we of course talk about the business model canvas, which is a widespread framework in management literature. And these more commercial models usually focus on scale and profit maximization. However, in these more alternative business models, growing too much or growing too fast may actually hinder local communities, and then it's not socially sustainable anymore. So the characteristics of these cultural business models are that they're essentially place-based. This means that there's a strong sense of identity from the heritage communities, and the projects are very deeply rooted in history. And this is always at the core of the value proposition of every business model. Also, the approaches can also be grassroots, which means that they're a bit different from the more classical top-down hierarchies. But however, of course, this comes at a cost of more complex governance structures. And also, we find that the heritage communities can take very different roles within a business model. They can be seen as key partners. They can be seen as key resources, as they have the intangible cultural heritage, or they can also be seen as key customer segments if they benefit, for example, from certain activities. Something that we find also very interesting is the readaptation of cultural heritage sites, be it buildings or cultural paths, and how this can be thought of as new opportunities for creating sustainable tourism activities.
So what would you recommend, or what would you suggest to local communities that want to develop sustainable creative tourism in those peripheral or rural areas, especially related to business modeling? What would you propose to them?
So we focus on mainly 3 recommendations. The first one is to think of stronger governance structures, whether you have a lot of stakeholders involved in a project or fewer. Having a clear and aligned vision among the relevant partners is key for ensuring the viability of the project. And this can be done through a combination of top-down hierarchy and bottom-up approaches. The second recommendation is to think of contracts when thinking about formalizing the services that you can find in a business model. And the third recommendation is about digital tools. And this digital communication can benefit both tourists, as they can access information more easily, as well as they can access some sort of platforms where they can find a combination of different services. But it can also benefit the heritage communities, as digital tools enable communication in an easier way.
Thank you. So for the first half of the project, you have been conducting the research and the reports that you have presented to us. What is following now? What are the next steps?
So we're now developing a series of workshops for our pilots. And this will be very useful for applying more the theoretical learnings and the insights from the reports into the local context and the projects of the different partners. And an idea of this would be how to apply these ideas with limited resources, with low budget marketing, for example, as well as how can we implement different digital tools at different stages of the business model.
Maria, thank you for all that information. Thank you for sharing it with us. I wish you all the best in your future work, and of course we will keep each other updated, and also our viewers updated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mateus. It was really nice.
Bye-bye.
Bye.